Welcome to True Crime Kin channel, where we dive into real stories that shake the core of human relationships. Today's case is one of shocking betrayal, twisted emotions, and a tragic ending that no one saw coming. So let's begin. Emma and Daniel Carter had what seemed to be the perfect life. Married for over a decade, they were the paradigm of success. Daniel was a high-powered corporate lawyer known for his charm and ruthless negotiation skills. Emma was a successful interior designer, admired for her impeccable taste and creativity. They lived in a luxurious home in an affluent neighborhood, often hosting glamorous parties for their circle of equally successful friends to the outside world. They were the ideal couple, but beneath the surface, Emma had begun to feel a growing distance between them. Daniel had become increasingly distant and distracted, often working late into the night. She dismissed it as the pressures of his job, but a nagging doubt had begun to take root in her mind. One evening, after another night of Daniel coming home late, Emma decided to tidy up his study. As she organized the scattered papers on his desk, her hand brushed against something odd. A small, unmarked USB drive. Curious, she plugged it into his computer, expecting to find work files. Instead, what she found shattered her world. Emma's hands trembled as she clicked on the only file on the drive. The video began with a shot of a lavish hotel room, dimly lit and decorated with an opulent flair. The camera was positioned in a corner, capturing the entire scene. A moment later, Daniel appeared on screen, looking relaxed and confident. Emma's heart sank as she watched him greet two stunning women who entered the room. The models were beautiful, their bodies sculpted and flawless. They were clearly professionals, familiar faces from the fashion magazines Emma often flipped her through. What unfolded next was a scene of wild debauchery, Daniel and the models indulging in a night of passion and excess. Emma felt sick as she watched her husband engage in acts that were both degrading and humiliating. The man on the screen was unrecognizable to her, a stranger who bore no resemblance to the loving husband she thought she knew. Tears streamed down her face as the video ended, leaving Emma in stunned silence. The betrayal was overwhelming, the pain unbearable. But as the initial shock began to fade, something darker took its place. Anger, cold and consuming. She knew she couldn't let this go unanswered. Emma sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the untouched cup of coffee in front of her. The early morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting a warm glow on the room. But she felt nothing but a cold, creeping dread. Her mind was a tangled web of emotions, confusion, hurt, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. She could barely comprehend what she had seen the night before. She had always trusted Daniel, even when their marriage had hit rough patches. They had been married for nearly 20 years. And although the passion had waned, she believed they were still solid. They had built a life together, weathered storms and come out stronger, or so she had thought. But the discovery she had made last night had shattered that illusion into a million pieces. It had started innocently enough. Daniel had gone to bed early, complaining of a headache, while Emma had stayed up to finish some work. As she tidied up the living room, she noticed his laptop sitting on the coffee table, still open. The screensaver hadn't kicked in yet, and for some reason she felt a strange impulse to check it. It wasn't something she normally did. She respected his privacy, but something about the way he had been acting lately made her uneasy. Her hands had trembled slightly as she moved the mouse, bringing the screen back to life. The moment the display lit up, she felt her heart skip a beat. There, on the screen was an email inbox filled with messages she had never seen before. The sender was a name she didn't recognize, but the subject lines made her stomach churn. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again and miss you already. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she clicked on one of the emails. What she read made her blood run cold. The message was from a woman named Lydia, and it was filled with explicit details about an affair she was having with Daniel. There were mentions of secret rendezvous, shared nights in expensive hotels, and promises of a future together. Lydia spoke of her love for Daniel, of how she couldn't wait for him to leave his wife so they could finally be together. Emma felt like the ground had been pulled out from under her. The room seemed to spin around her as she read through email after email, each one confirming what she didn't want to believe. Daniel, the man she had devoted her life to, was having an affair, and not just any affair. This was something deep, something that had been going on for months, if not longer. The messages spoke of a relationship filled with passion and intimacy, the kind that she hadn't shared with Daniel in years. Her hands shook as she scrolled her face through the emails, her mind racing. How could she have been so blind? There had been signs, of course, Daniel's frequent late nights at the office, his sudden interest in his appearance, the way he had started avoiding her touch. But she had brushed them aside, convincing herself that they were just the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage. Now she realized that she had been lying to herself, choosing ignorance over the painful truth. As she reached the most recent email dated just a few hours earlier, Emma felt a surge of anger unlike anything she had ever experienced. The message was brief, but it was enough to break her heart all over again. Lydia had written, "I can't wait to see you tonight. I love you." And beneath that, Daniel had replied, "Me too. I'll make an excuse to leave after dinner. I love you more." Emma had slammed the laptop shut, unable to read anymore. Her hands had gone numb, and she had stumbled to the bathroom, where she had retched into the sink, her body trembling with shock. When she had finally managed to pull herself together, she had crept back into the bedroom, staring at Daniel as he slept soundly, oblivious to the storm he had unleashed. She had wanted to scream at him, to shake him awake and demand answers, but something had held her back. Instead, she had crawled into bed beside him, her mind whirling with thoughts of revenge, of how she would make him pay for what he had done. Now, as she sat at the kitchen table, the reality of her situation began to sink in. She couldn't pretend this hadn't happened. She couldn't just go on with her life as if everything was normal. But what could she do? Confronting Daniel seemed inevitable, but the thought of hearing him lie to her face, of watching him try to weasel his way out of this, made her sick to her stomach. Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She needed to think clearly, to plan her next move carefully. Daniel might have betrayed her, but she wasn't going to let him get away with it. She had always been the calm, rational one in their marriage, the one who kept things together when everything else was falling apart. But this time she was done being the peacemaker. This time she was going to fight back. She stood up from the table, her mind made up. She would confront Daniel, but she would do it on her terms. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing her breakdown. No, she would be strong. She would be in control. And when the time was right, she would exact her revenge in a way that he would never see coming. With a newfound resolve, Emma began to make her plans. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was determined. Daniel had underestimated her, but he was about to find out just how wrong he had been. Emma bided her time, waiting for the perfect moment to confront Daniel. She wanted to catch him off guard, to strip away his power and leave him vulnerable. That moment came one evening when Daniel returned home earlier than usual, looking pleased with himself. He greeted Emma with a kiss, unaware that his world was about to come crashing down. "Daniel, we need to talk," Emma said, her voice calm but firm. Daniel looked at her curiously, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "What is it, Em?" Without a word, Emma handed him the USB drive. Daniel's expression shifted from confusion to alarm as he recognized the device. His hands shook as he plugged it into his laptop and opened the file. As the video played, Daniel's face paled. He watched in horror, unable to look away. When it ended, he turned to Emma, his eyes wide with panic. "Emma, I can explain," he began, but Emma cut him off. "Explain what, Daniel? How you've been lying to me. How you've been sneaking around with these women behind my back." Her voice trembled with a mix of anger and pain. "You disgust me," Daniel stammered, searching for words that wouldn't come. The confident, powerful man she had known was gone, replaced by someone who was frightened and desperate. "Please, Emma, it was a mistake," he pleaded. "I never meant to hurt you." Emma shook her head, her resolve hardening. "You didn't just hurt me, Daniel. You destroyed everything. And now you're going to pay." Over the following days, Emma kept her distance from Daniel, leaving him to stew in his guilt and fear. She knew he was terrified of what she might do, and she used that to her advantage. She needed him to feel powerless, to understand that she was in control. But Emma wasn't content with simply humiliating Daniel. She wanted more. She wanted him to suffer, to feel the same pain and betrayal that she had felt. She began to devise a plan. One that would turn his life upside down and leave him with nothing. First, she contacted a lawyer, one who was known for handling high-profile divorces with ruthless efficiency. She made sure all the legal documents were in place, ready to be filed at a moment's notice. Emma had no intention of leaving the marriage empty-handed. She would take everything that mattered to Daniel. Next, she began to subtly sabotage his professional life using the information she had gathered. Emma anonymously leaked details of Daniel's affair to the partners at his law firm. She knew how much his reputation meant to him, and she wanted to see it destroyed. The scandal would be all over the news soon, and Daniel would be the laughingstock of the legal community. But Emma wasn't done yet. She needed to strike at the heart of Daniel's arrogance and pride. She reached out to the two models posing as a journalist interested in doing a feature on their careers. During the interviews, she hinted at the possibility of a tell-all story that would expose their affair with Daniel. The women, sensing an opportunity for fame, eagerly agreed to go public with their side of the story. Everything was falling into place. Emma could see the pieces of Daniel's life crumbling, and it filled her with a twisted sense of satisfaction. But as she prepared to set her plan into motion, she had no idea that events were about to spiral out of control in ways she could never have anticipated. Daniel was unraveling. The pressure from Emma's coldness, the fear of the impending scandal, and the constant worry about his career were all taking their toll. He had become paranoid, convinced that everyone around him knew about his affair and was judging him for it. The guilt and stress were eating away at him, and he began to crack under the strain at work. Daniel's performance suffered. He made mistakes during important negotiations, missed deadlines, and became increasingly irritable with his colleagues. The once respected lawyer was now a shadow of his former self, and the partners at the firm were beginning to take notice. At home, things were even worse. Emma's icy demeanor and refusal to engage with him drove Daniel to the brink. He tried to apologize to make amends, but she shut him down at every turn. The tension in the house was unbearable, and Daniel felt like he was living in a nightmare from which he couldn't wake up one evening after a particularly grueling day at work. Daniel came home to find Emma waiting for him in the living room. She was holding a stack of papers, the divorce papers. Daniel's heart sank as he realized what was happening. "Emma, please," he begged, dropping to his knees in front of her. "Don't do this. I'll do anything to make it right." Emma looked down at him, her face expressionless. "It's too late, Daniel. You've destroyed everything. There's no going back." She handed him the papers and turned to leave. But before she could take a step, Daniel grabbed her arm. His grip was tight, almost desperate. "Let go of me, Daniel," Emma said, her voice low in warning. But Daniel didn't let go. His eyes were wild, filled with a mix of fear and anger. "You can't leave me, Emma. You don't understand. I can't live without you." Emma felt a surge of panic as she tried to pull away, but Daniel's grip only tightened. "Daniel, you're hurting me. Let go." In that moment, something in Daniel snapped. He released her suddenly, causing Emma to stumble back. The look in his eyes terrified her. It was as if he was a different person entirely, someone unhinged and dangerous. Emma backed away slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to get out of there, but she didn't know what Daniel might do next. The situation was spiraling out of control, and she was no longer sure if she could stop it. The days that followed were a blur of tension and fear. Daniel had become increasingly unstable, swinging between desperate attempts to win Emma back and bouts of rage that left her fearing for her safety. Emma knew she had to leave, but she also knew that if she left too abruptly, it could push Daniel over the edge. She began to make plans in secret, packing a bag and hiding it in the trunk of her car. She also transferred money from their joint account into a private account, ensuring she would have the resources to start over. But every time she looked at Daniel, she saw the broken man he had become, and she felt a pang of guilt. Despite everything, she had loved him once, and part of her still did. One evening, after another explosive argument, Daniel stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Emma watched him go, her heart heavy with a mix of relief and dread. She knew this couldn't go on much longer. Something had to give. As she sat alone in the quiet house, Emma's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a news alert, and her blood ran cold when she saw the headline. High-profile lawyer caught in scandalous affair. 2 models to go public. Emma clicked on the article, her hands shaking. The story detailed everything. The affair, the tape, the involvement of the two models. It was all there, laid out for the world to see. Emma's plan had worked, but the consequences were far greater than she had anticipated. The article was already going viral, and she knew it was only a matter of time before Daniel saw it. Her heart pounded in her chest as she imagined his reaction. She had wanted to destroy him, but now she realized that she might have pushed him too far. As she sat there, lost in thought, the sound of the front door opening startled her. Daniel was back, and from the look on his face, he had seen the article. His eyes were filled with a mix of rage and despair, and Emma knew that the situation was about to escalate to a dangerous level. Daniel stood in the doorway, his chest heaving with anger. His eyes were locked onto Emma, who was frozen in place. She could see the rage boiling just beneath the surface, and she knew that this time there was no talking him down. "You did this," Daniel hissed, holding up his phone with the article displayed on the screen. "You ruined me." Emma swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. "You ruined yourself, Daniel. You made those choices, not me." Daniel's face twisted with fury, and he took a step towards her. "You think you're so righteous, don't you? Like you're the victim here, but you're just as guilty as I am." Emma backed away, her heart pounding in her chest. "Daniel, please just calm down. We can talk about this." Daniel sneered. "We're past talking, Emma. You've destroyed everything. My career, my reputation, everything." Emma's mind raced as she tried to think of a way to defuse the situation, but before she could say anything, Daniel lunged at her. Emma barely had time to react as he grabbed her by the shoulders and shoved her against the wall. Pain shot through her back as she hit the wall and she gasped for breath. Daniel's face was inches from hers, his eyes wild with anger. "You think you can just walk away from this?" he growled. "You think you can just ruin my life and get away with it?" Emma struggled against his grip, but he was too strong. "Daniel, please stop. You're hurting me." But Daniel wasn't listening. He was too far gone, consumed by his own rage and despair. "You're not going anywhere, Emma. You're mine. And if I can't have you, no one will." Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she realized how dangerous the situation had become. She had to get away, but she was trapped. Her mind raced as she desperately searched for a way out. Emma's survival instincts kicked in. She knew she had to get out of the house, but Daniel's grip on her was unyielding. As she struggled, her hand brushed against a decorative vase on the nearby table. Without thinking, she grabbed it and smashed it against Daniel's head. Daniel staggered back, stunned by the blow. Emma didn't waste a second. She bolted towards the front door, her heart racing. She could hear Daniel recovering behind her, his footsteps heavy as he stumbled after her. Emma threw open the door and sprinted outside, the cool night air hitting her like a shock. She ran towards her car, fumbling for her keys with shaking hands. Behind her, she could hear Daniel shouting her name, his voice filled with rage. Finally, she managed to unlock the car and threw herself inside. She slammed the door shut just as Daniel reached her, pounding on the window with his fist. His face was contorted with fury, and Emma could see the desperation in his eyes. "Emma, don't you dare leave me," Daniel screamed, his voice muffled by the glass. With trembling hands, Emma started the car and threw it into gear. She backed out of the driveway, her heart pounding as Daniel continued to pound on the window. The tires screeched as she sped away, leaving Daniel behind in the darkness. As she drove, Emma's mind raced. She had escaped, but she knew it wasn't over. Daniel was unhinged, and she had no idea what he might do next. She needed to get somewhere safe, somewhere he couldn't find her. But as she drove through the empty streets, Emma realized that there was no safe place for her. Daniel knew too much about her, where she worked, where her friends lived, her routines. She had no idea where to go or who to turn to. Emma's mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion as she drove aimlessly, trying to come up with a plan. She knew she couldn't go to the police. Daniel was too powerful, too well connected. He would find a way to turn it against her. As she drove through the night, Emma began to feel the weight of her situation pressing down on her. She had escaped, but she was still trapped with no way out, and she knew deep down that the worst was yet to come. Emma found herself in a dingy motel on the outskirts of town, far from the luxurious life she had once known. The room was small and musty. With peeling wallpaper and a flickering light bulb that cast eerie shadows on the walls, she sat on the edge of the bed, her mind racing as she tried to come to terms with everything that had happened. She couldn't stop thinking about Daniel, his wild eyes, his desperate voice, the look of fury on his face as she had driven away. She knew he wouldn't give up easily. He would come after her, and when he found her, she had no idea what he might do. Emma felt a wave of despair wash over her. How had it come to this? Just weeks ago, she had been living a life of comfort and security. Now she was hiding in a seedy motel, fearing for her life. The thought of what she had lost was almost too much to bear, but alongside the despair was a deep-seated anger. Daniel had done this to her. He had betrayed her, humiliated her, and driven her to the brink of madness. She had wanted revenge, but now she was the one who was suffering. The injustice of it all made her blood boil. As she sat in the darkness, Emma began to feel a cold resolve take hold of her. She wasn't going to let Daniel win. She had come too far, sacrificed too much to be defeated. Now she would fight back, and she would make sure that Daniel paid for what he had done. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Daniel was powerful, and he had resources that she couldn't match. But Emma had something he didn't. She had nothing left to lose. She was willing to do whatever it took to survive, even if it meant crossing lines she had never imagined. Emma spent the night planning her next move. She knew she needed to be smart, to outthink Daniel at every turn. She would have to be ruthless, to use every advantage she had, and she would have to be prepared for the worst because she knew that this fight could only end one way. By the time the sun began to rise, Emma had a plan. It was risky, and it would require her to tap into a darkness she had never known existed within her, but she was ready. The game was on, and this time she wasn't going to lose. Emma spent the next few days preparing for the confrontation she knew was coming. She gathered supplies, made arrangements, and set her plan into motion. She was careful, methodical, leaving nothing to chance. She knew that this was her last shot, and she couldn't afford to make any mistakes. She sent Daniel a message cryptic, but clear enough to ensure he would understand. The message simply read, "Meet me where it all began." She knew he would understand. She was referring to the place where they had first met, a secluded spot in the woods where they had often gone to escape the pressures of their lives. Emma arrived at the spot early, setting up the scene exactly as she had planned. The clearing was quiet, the air thick with tension. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she waited for Daniel to arrive. She knew this was it. One way or another, it would all end here. As she waited, Emma's mind raced her through the events that had led them to this point. She thought about the tape, the affair, the lies and betrayals. She thought about the man Daniel had become and how he had dragged her down into the darkness with him. And she thought about the revenge she had planned, the price he would have to pay for everything he had done. Finally, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Emma's heart skipped a beat as she saw Daniel emerge from the trees, his face a mask of determination and rage. He had come alone, just as she had expected. "Emma," Daniel said, his voice low and menacing. "What the hell is this?" Emma stood her ground, her eyes locked onto his. "This is the end, Daniel. It's over." Daniel took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can just walk away from this? You think you can get away with everything you've done?" Emma felt a surge of adrenaline as she reached into her pocket and pulled out the gun she had brought with her. She pointed it at Daniel, her hands steady. "I'm not the one who's going to pay Daniel. You are." Daniel froze, his eyes widening in shock. For a moment, they stood there in silence, the tension between them almost palpable. Then slowly, Daniel raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Emma, please," he said, his voice shaking. "You don't have to do this." But Emma was beyond reasoning. She had come too far, endured too much to back down now. "Yes, I do," she said, her voice cold and determined. "This is the only way." She squeezed the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the clearing, a sharp crack that seemed to hang in the air for an eternity. Daniel staggered back, a look of disbelief on his face. He fell to the ground. Clutching his chest as blood began to pool beneath him, Emma stood over him, the gun still in her hand. She felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, satisfaction, and a deep, overwhelming sadness. She had done it. She had taken her revenge. But as she looked down at Daniel's lifeless body, she realized that the victory was hollow. The reality of what she had done began to sink in. She had killed him. She had crossed a line that she could never uncross. And there was no going back. The enormity of her actions hit her like a tidal wave, and she fell to her knees, the gun slipping from her grasp. Emma stayed there for what felt like hours, staring at the man she had once loved, now lying dead at her feet. She had wanted to destroy him, but in the process she had destroyed herself as well. Eventually, the sound of sirens in the distance broke through her haze. Someone must have heard the gunshot and called the police. Emma knew they were coming for her, and she made no move to escape. She had done what she came to do, and now she was ready to face the consequences. When the police arrived, they found Emma sitting next to Daniel's body, her face streaked with tears. She didn't resist as they handcuffed her and led her away. She felt numb, detached from the world around her. The revenge she had sought had come at a price she hadn't fully understood until it was too late in the days that followed. Emma's story became a media sensation. The tale of betrayal, scandal, and murder captivated the public, and everyone had an opinion on what had happened. But Emma didn't care about any of it. She was lost in her own world, consumed by the weight of her actions. As she sat in her prison cell, waiting for the trial that would determine her fate, Emma thought about everything that had led her to this point. The love she had once felt for Daniel, the anger and betrayal that had driven her to the edge, and the revenge that had ultimately destroyed them both. She knew now that revenge had been a fool's errand, a dark path that had led to nothing but pain and regret. And as she faced the long years ahead, Emma was left with only one thought, that in the end, the price of revenge had been far too high. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like this video for more true crime video. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Take care and see you in the next video.